I never thought I'd be the one telling this kind of story. You hear stories like these and think, that could never be me. But life has a way of surprising you. I'm not going to tell you my name because that's not what matters. What matters is what happened, the decisions I made and what came after. I won't pretend to be proud of it, but I'm not here to hide either. This is my truth. When I married Daniel, I truly believed I had found everything I'd ever wanted in a man. He was thoughtful, smart, had a sense of humor that made me laugh even on bad days, and he carried himself with a quiet confidence that made you feel safe. Our wedding was small, nothing fancy, but full of love. We didn't have much, but we had big dreams, dreams of a warm home, shared meals, and kids one day. The early years were beautiful. We traveled when we could, cooked together in the evenings, and stayed up late just talking about anything and everything. Daniel had goals. He was ambitious, and I admired that. He worked hard at his job, and I cheered him on every step of the way. I believed that love meant standing by him no matter what, even if it meant putting my own plans on hold. I took a part-time job at a nearby boutique and managed most things at home. I thought it was just for a little while, until he got more settled in his career. But days turned into months, and then years. Slowly, I began to feel like I was disappearing. He worked longer hours, went on more business trips, and when he was home, his mind was still somewhere else. The man who used to send sweet texts or kiss my forehead without warning had become distant. Whenever I tried to bring it up, he'd tell me to just hold on a little longer. Once I land this promotion, or, after this next quarter, he'd say. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But in reality, I was growing lonelier by the day. Our talks turned into exchanges about bills and schedules. We stopped being a couple and became more like roommates. There was no more passion, no more warmth, just a routine that felt colder every day. I kept telling myself marriages go through hard seasons. That this too would pass, and eventually, things would go back to how they once were. But deep down, I had already started slipping away. That's when Eric entered my life, not with fanfare, not with force, but quietly, gently. He was the new manager at the boutique where I worked. He smiled with ease and spoke with kindness, not just about work, but about life, about things I hadn't spoken about in a long time. He noticed me, not just the woman who clocked in, but the person behind the tired eyes and fading smile. At first, our talks were just friendly. But slowly, we started sharing more. Books we loved, music that made us feel something, little stories from our childhoods. He listened, really listened, and I realized how long it had been since anyone had looked at me with interest. I told myself it was nothing. Just a connection. I wasn't crossing any lines. But then I started dressing differently for work, wearing lipstick again, doing my hair with a little more care, not for Daniel, but for Eric. And that's when I knew I was lying to myself. Soon, the messages started. A few jokes, some harmless memes. Then deeper conversations at night, when the house was quiet and Daniel was either still at work or already asleep beside me. Eric would ask about my day. He'd say things like, "You deserve to smile more," or, "You seem sad, are you okay?" It shook me, not because of what he said, but because someone noticed. One evening, while Daniel was away on yet another business trip, Eric asked if I wanted to grab a coffee after work. I paused. I knew this wasn't just coffee. But I agreed. We met at a quiet little cafe tucked away from the usual streets, and what was meant to be 20 minutes stretched into hours. We talked like old friends. I laughed in a way I hadn't in years. In that moment, I didn't feel like someone's wife or someone's background support system. I felt like myself again, someone who mattered. That night, I didn't go straight home. I didn't sleep much either. I stared at the ceiling, wondering what I was doing, knowing deep down I was already somewhere I shouldn't be. But I didn't stop, because the truth is, I didn't want to. Eric made me feel wanted. And that feeling was like a drug I hadn't tasted in so long, I forgot how powerful it was. When I came home that night, my chest was tight with mixed feelings. Part of me felt alive again, but another part was heavy with guilt. I hadn't done anything physical with Eric, not yet, but deep down, I knew I was standing too close to a line I shouldn't even be near. I kept trying to convince myself that it was just a harmless connection, a friendship I needed because I felt so alone. But the truth was, it had already become more than that. Eric kept showing up for me in ways Daniel no longer did. He listened. He asked about my day. He reminded me of who I used to be. And slowly, the emotional bond we shared began to grow deeper. Meanwhile, at home, Daniel barely noticed. He was always on his laptop or phone, caught up in his never-ending deadlines. I was falling apart inside, but to him, everything looked the same on the surface. Then it happened. One afternoon after work, Eric told me he had feelings for me. I froze. My heart was pounding. As much as I'd tried to avoid admitting it, I had feelings for him too. But I was someone's wife. I had stood in front of friends and family, made vows, built a life. I didn't want to be the person who threw it all away. So, I pulled back. I started ignoring his texts more, avoided lingering around him at work, tried to set boundaries I should have set long ago. But my resolve didn't last. Every time I saw him, everything inside me stirred. I felt torn, one part of me still trying to hold on to my marriage, and the other craving the warmth I was no longer getting at home. After one especially painful argument with Daniel, the kind where we both said hurtful things and walked away in silence, I reached out to Eric again. He offered to meet me at a park, just to talk. It was quiet that night, and the air felt different, heavier, charged. We sat beneath the trees and spoke softly, but the words didn't matter as much as the feelings we weren't saying. I leaned in without even thinking, and then, we kissed. It was everything I had been avoiding and everything I had secretly wanted. The moment ended as quickly as it began, but it changed everything. I went home that night feeling like someone else. The guilt wrapped around me, but it couldn't drown out the part of me that felt seen again. That kiss opened the door I could no longer close. What started as one kiss became something more. More meetings, more stolen time, more lies. Every time I told myself it was over, I'd find myself back in his arms. I became good at hiding it, too good. Daniel never noticed. He was buried in work, and I used that to my advantage. I learned how to smile just enough, talk just enough, and keep the truth buried deep beneath a rehearsed routine. I started making excuses, business lunches with friends, errands that always took a little too long, even fake family emergencies. I hated who I was becoming, but I couldn't stop. The guilt began to seep into every part of my life, and soon, it was unbearable. Daniel, unaware of what I was hiding, began trying to reconnect. He brought home flowers, planned weekend getaways, made small efforts to reignite what we once had. I saw him trying. I really did, but my heart was already split in two. I wanted to let Eric go. I tried, but every time I tried to distance myself, he'd find the words that pulled me back in. He'd remind me how unseen and unloved I had felt before him, how he had brought life back into me when I was empty. And for a while, I let myself believe that was love. Then came our 10th wedding anniversary. Daniel planned a surprise, a weekend in a quiet mountain cabin. No phones, no emails, no distractions. Just us. He wanted to reconnect, to remember why we chose each other in the first place. A part of me was hopeful. Maybe there was still something worth saving. But I was also afraid. Afraid that I might find out there was nothing left to salvage at all. That weekend, Daniel opened up in a way he hadn't in years. He talked about how blind he'd been, how his ambition had clouded everything, including me. He cried when he said he was sorry. He held my hands and said he wanted us to rebuild. And in that raw, honest moment, I saw the man I had once fallen so deeply in love with. My heart ached under the weight of what I had done. I couldn't keep living this lie. I knew when we returned home that I had to end things with Eric. And I did, but it wasn't easy. He was hurt, broken even. He begged me not to walk away, asked how I could forget the way Daniel had left me feeling invisible for so long. But my mind was made up. I had already caused enough damage, and I couldn't add more pain to the pile. I truly believed that ending it would bring some form of peace. That it would be the first step toward healing. But secrets have a way of surfacing, especially the ones you bury deepest. I thought walking away from Eric would be the end. That I could quietly sweep the mess I made under the rug and begin again with Daniel. But guilt is a stubborn ghost. It followed me everywhere. It whispered through the quiet moments and screamed in the silence of Daniel's kindness. Every time he reached for my hand, every sweet gesture, felt like a reminder of my betrayal. I tried to be a better wife. I tried to pour myself back into the life we had built. But some cracks run too deep. I tried. I really did. I cooked his favorite meals, left little notes, even surprised him with date nights. I suggested we see a counselor together, hoping that maybe, just maybe, we could rediscover the closeness we once had. And Daniel, bless his heart, welcomed it all. He opened up again, smiled more, touched me more gently. He believed we were finding our way back to each other. That we were healing, but inside, I was falling apart. Every time I looked into his eyes, I saw a man who trusted me with everything. And I was holding on to a truth that would shatter him. I kept telling myself the worst was over. That I'd cut ties, that I had done the right thing. Weeks passed, then months. Life settled back into its familiar rhythm. On the surface, things looked normal again. But the guilt never stopped tightening around my chest. The storm hadn't passed, it had just gone quiet. Then the phone rang. The name on the screen turned my blood cold. Eric. I hadn't heard from him since the day I ended things. My hand trembled as I picked up the call. "I need to see you," he said, his voice shaky. I closed my eyes. "No, Eric, we talked about this. It's over." There was silence for a beat, then he whispered, "It's not over for me. You can't just walk away like none of it mattered." His voice didn't sound like the man I once knew. There was something sharp behind it, something I hadn't heard before. "I've been patient," he went on. "But I'm not going to be your dirty little secret forever." "Eric, please," I said quietly, trying to stay calm. "Please don't do this. I deserve better than to be thrown away," he snapped. "You used me." His words landed hard, and maybe part of them were true. But I knew arguing would only make things worse. I ended the call. I told myself he was angry, hurt, and that he just needed time. But the fear in my chest said otherwise. Something in his voice had changed. The sweetness I once clung to was gone, replaced by something bitter. Something dangerous. A few days later, the texts started. At first, they were vague. A blurry photo of the cafe we used to meet at. A picture of the bench at the park. Then came screenshots, fragments of our conversations, bits and pieces of my guilt in digital form. The past I had tried so hard to bury was being unearthed. And someone, Eric, was holding a shovel. I panicked. The texts kept coming, relentless, haunting, and I lived in constant fear that Daniel would see them. I changed every password, blocked every number, but they just kept coming from different sources. Eric wasn't just angry, he was determined. He was playing a dangerous game, and I was the pawn caught in the middle of it. I thought about telling Daniel the truth. I rehearsed the words in my head 1,000 times. But every time I looked at him, so hopeful, so open, trying so hard to rebuild what we once had, I froze. How could I confess now, after he had poured so much into mending our marriage? The risk felt too high. Our home, our history, his love, I couldn't bear the thought of losing it all. But the longer I stayed silent, the more power I gave to Eric. Then one evening, it happened. Daniel came home quiet, too quiet. He didn't smile. He didn't kiss me hello. He just moved past me, dropped his bag by the door, and sat down. I stood frozen, my heart thudding. Something was wrong. I knew it before he even opened his mouth. When he finally did, his voice was low, cold. "I need to ask you something." I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Of course. What is it?" He looked up at me then, eyes hollow. "Is there anything you need to tell me?" My blood turned to ice. I tried to speak, but my throat tightened. Then he reached into his pocket and placed his phone on the table. On the screen were Eric's messages, every photo, every screenshot, every stolen word. All of it, laid bare. For a moment, the world went silent. I can explain," I whispered, my voice already cracking. "Explain," he repeated, barely above a whisper. "Explain what? That you've been lying to me. That you betrayed me while I was out there killing myself to give us a better life." The tears started falling before I could stop them. "Daniel, I never meant for it to happen. I was lonely. I was lost. You were lonely," he shot back, fury now replacing the quiet in his voice. "And your answer was to crawl into someone else's arms." His voice broke as he stood, eyes blazing with hurt. "Do you even realize what you've done to me? To us?" I dropped to my knees, sobbing, reaching for him with shaking hands. "Please, Daniel, I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But I ended it, months ago. I swear to you, it's over." But my words meant nothing. He stared at me like I was a stranger. His face was hard, unreadable, but his eyes were filled with betrayal. "You ended it," he repeated, this time with a hollow, bitter laugh. "You ended it. The man I loved was slipping away from me, and I didn't know how to stop it." "Congratulations," Daniel said with a venomous smile. "I guess I'm supposed to be grateful." He stood up and walked toward the door. "Daniel, please," I cried, stumbling after him. "Don't leave. We can fix this. We can go to counseling." We can. He turned around sharply, his face twisted with disbelief. Counseling. You think therapy can erase what you did? You shattered my trust, my dignity. I had never seen him like that. So broken, so empty. And then, in a voice colder than I ever imagined possible, he looked at me with eyes that no longer held love and said, "You made your choice. Now live with it." The door slammed behind him, and I collapsed onto the floor, my sobs echoing through a house that had suddenly become a tomb of memories. The days that followed were a slow descent into hell. Daniel moved into a hotel and cut off all communication. He didn't answer my calls. He didn't respond to my texts. Just, nothing. And then the news spread. His family found out. Mine did too. The shame hit like a tidal wave. Everyone was shocked, confused, disappointed, angry. Friends stopped reaching out. Family gatherings turned into unbearable silences. No one said it out loud, but I saw it in their eyes. Judgment, betrayal, pity. Even my job at the boutique became suffocating. Small towns don't keep secrets, and mine had become the town's favorite tragedy. People whispered. Strangers stared. I felt like I was wearing my failure on my skin, like guilt had become my second name. And Eric, he vanished. After torching my life, he disappeared without a trace. No messages, no calls, nothing. The man who once whispered promises and held me like I was his world had slipped away like smoke. I was left with nothing but wreckage and ash. Weeks dragged on with no word from Daniel. I fell into a spiral I didn't know how to escape from. My world became a blur of sleepless nights, tear-stained pillows, and relentless guilt. The affair hadn't just ruined my marriage, it had fractured my very sense of self. I no longer recognized the woman in the mirror. I was hollowed out, ashamed, and utterly alone. Then, one afternoon, when I thought things couldn't feel more final, I received a letter. It was from Daniel's attorney. He was filing for divorce. I sat on the couch for what felt like hours, staring at the paper in my hands, unable to absorb the weight of what it meant. This wasn't a bad dream I could wake up from. This was my life now. This was the end. The divorce process was colder than I ever could have imagined. There were no emotional outbursts, no confrontations, no last-minute pleas. Just legal terms, sterile documents, lines to sign, and an eerie silence that echoed louder than any fight ever could. 10 years of love, history, laughter, and life, reduced to paperwork. I was left in an empty house that no longer felt like home. Just a monument to everything I had destroyed. As I packed up the last of my belongings, ready to leave the home we once built together, my hand brushed against something familiar. An old photo album. Dusty, forgotten, but powerful. I sat down on the floor and flipped through the pages. Snapshots of our honeymoon, our first Christmas, lazy Sundays curled up on the couch, laughing at nothing and everything. Memories flooded in like a tidal wave. I clutched the album to my chest and broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I mourned not just the marriage, but the version of myself I had buried with it, the woman who once loved so purely, before she lost her way. Still, I needed closure. I reached out to Daniel one last time. Not to beg him to come back. I knew that door had long closed, but to offer a real, unfiltered apology. He agreed to meet me at a quiet park where we used to share lazy picnics and dreams of the future. He arrived calm, composed, but distant. There was a wall around him now. One I had built brick by brick with every lie and betrayal. "I don't expect you to forgive me," I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. "I just needed you to hear it from me. I'm so sorry, Daniel. For everything." He didn't say much, just nodded slightly, his eyes unreadable. I continued, knowing this was my last chance to say what needed to be said. "I know I can't undo what I've done. I know I've lost you. But I want you to know, I never stopped loving you. Even when I was lost." He finally spoke, his words soft but cutting deep. "Love isn't enough when trust is gone." It crushed me more than any scream or insult ever could. We sat there in silence, two ghosts of what used to be. After a few minutes, he stood, looked at me one last time, and walked away. That was the last time I saw Daniel. The months that followed were hollow. I moved into a small apartment, bare walls, secondhand furniture, and a silence that screamed. I threw myself into work, therapy, and the hard, messy process of trying to forgive myself. But that remains the hardest part. Looking back, I can see how blind I was. I mistook my emptiness for abandonment. I clung to a fleeting escape instead of confronting my pain. I let loneliness justify betrayal. And by the time I woke up to the damage I'd done, it was too late. Now, I live every day with the weight of those choices. Not as a victim, but as someone who failed. My story isn't about asking for sympathy or excuses. It's about owning my truth. Because sometimes, the greatest punishment isn't what others do to you. It's what you carry inside your own heart. Daniel eventually moved on. I heard he remarried. A mutual friend showed me a picture once, him with his new wife, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. It wrecked me, but also, it didn't. Because in that moment, beneath the sadness and the sharp stab of regret, I felt a flicker of relief. He found happiness, even if it wasn't with me. And he deserved that. As for me, I focused on healing. Therapy became my sanctuary, a space where I could no longer hide behind blame or excuses. It forced me to face the hard truths I'd spent years avoiding. I came to realize the affair wasn't just about Daniel's absence or neglect. It was also about me, my own fears, my insecurities, and my silence. Instead of speaking up, I shut down. Instead of reaching for help, I reached for escape. I found comfort in the wrong arms, when what I truly needed was the courage to confront what was broken within me. In time, I surrounded myself with a small circle of friends, people who knew everything yet never judged. Their compassion, quiet and unwavering, became a lifeline. I began to rebuild, slowly and deliberately, not to seek another relationship, but to find peace within myself. The biggest lesson I carry now is this: betrayal doesn't end when the affair does. Its aftermath echoes through every corner of your life. It changes how you see yourself, how others see you, and how you navigate every relationship after. Forgiveness from others is rare. But self-forgiveness, that is the true mountain. Even now, I sometimes walk past the park where Daniel and I had our final conversation. I sit on the same bench. I whisper the same words into the wind. I'm sorry, not because I believe he'll hear me, but because I need to remind myself never to forget. To stay honest. To never again seek shortcuts through pain. And above all, to face life head-on, no matter how uncomfortable or hard. My story isn't a redemption arc. There's no fairy tale ending. It's a story of choices. Of consequences. And it's a story I'll carry with me, for the rest of my life. This story is a sobering reminder that love, once lost through betrayal, is not always recoverable. It urges us to pause, reflect, and realize that every action, especially those taken in loneliness and silence, can ripple through not just our own lives but the hearts of those who trusted us most. May we learn, not to judge, but to understand. Not to shame, but to grow. Thank you for reading this deeply personal journey. Your time and attention mean everything. We hope this story stirred reflection, sparked compassion, and maybe, even healing. To everyone who has loved, lost, and learned, this story is for you. If this touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more real, raw, and reflective stories. Warning disclaimer. This story is a fictionalized dramatization inspired by real-life emotional experiences. Names, locations, and events have been changed to protect the privacy of individuals. Any resemblance to real persons is purely coincidental. This is not meant to encourage infidelity, but to explore the emotional consequences that follow.